Hey guys, welcome back. On this week's episode of 2.5 Takes, we're discussing some of the potential outcomes and futures for Odell Beckham Jr., Lamar Jackson, and DeAndre Hopkins. I'm your host, Brandon, and today I'm joined by Tim and Paul. As always, if you like what you hear, drop us a like, and to stay in the loop for all things NFL related, hit that subscribe button below. With that being said, let's start with Lamar Jackson. How do we think his next few months are going to play out? Right now, he's on a non-exclusive franchise tag with the Ravens at 1 year for $32.4 million.
Yeah, so I'm pretty long on Lamar Jackson. I think the whole franchise tag situation has been a huge eye opener to Lamar. I think he's looked around the league and realized that he's kind of come to terms with the value that's been placed on him. I do think that some teams are struggling to look at his current situation and see themselves, putting up front 2 first-round picks along with paying him a up north to $250 million contract that's fully guaranteed. I think that guaranteed piece is really the huge barrier between Lamar getting a deal done with the Ravens and the current situation that he's in. So I do think the Ravens have all the leverage. I mean, a $32.4 million deal is pretty discounted for Lamar Jackson and his services. However, it is a fully guaranteed deal that Lamar will get to take home in cash on the 2023 season. But I do think that he'll go into the season with a huge chip on his shoulder. I think he's going to want to look to prove a lot of teams wrong, and that he's still a viable long-term starter in today's league, even after not finishing the past 2 seasons due to injury.
Yeah, even as like a long-term question too. Like if you're long on him and say you're long on him at the Ravens, I think there's a bridge or like this is a crappy analogy, but if it was on Facebook, it would say it's complicated, this relationship right now. As goofy as that is.
No, that's a great analogy. Analogy.
The Ravens need to give him a receiver. I loosely correlate it to the Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers kind of situation. Aaron Rodgers always pissed and never gave him a good receiver. And I think it's kind of a similar situation here. He hasn't really had consistent, healthy, and or talented weapons his entire career there.
Right. I think the Ravens have taken shots at wide receiver with Rashad Bateman and with Hollywood Brown. I just think that, they've kind of gotten a little unlucky with it, being that Rashad Bateman has struggled with a lot of injuries so far. He's still in a pretty early part of his career, though, so you could potentially turn that around going into 2023. But, yeah, Hollywood Brown, I mean, I think that was a good, decent relationship that they have, but I don't know if Lamar really – is the kind of quarterback that, would have Hollywood Brown thrive. But I think that it's still a good weapon for Lamar to have in his utility belt. But
yeah, I think in this, it's like, quote unquote, it's a complicated situation. I think there's growing up to do on both sides. Ravens maybe need to look at giving him another weapon, while Lamar maybe needs to look at kind of trying to level out and mature a little bit, like especially on social media. I mean, he can be kind of a little bit of a firecracker sometimes. I mean, some of his tweets, responses, that type thing. I think he has a little bit of growing up to do in this regard.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I mean, dude, during the owners meeting, they had John Harbaugh up, and as soon as he started his interview, I don't know if you caught this or not, Lamar literally posted a tweet saying that, like, I demanded a trade, and they brought it up to John Harbaugh out of the blue, like right then and there during his interview. So I agree with you. I think that there is maybe a little bit of maturing to do on Lamar's end, but again, I think that he is worth. Don't get me wrong, he's worth a contract, in terms of Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and Dak Prescott. I mean, all of these guys getting paid 40, 45 million plus, and for Josh Allen to have a deal done, Mahomes to have a deal done. I mean, there's dual threat quarterbacks that can succeed in this league. I think that Lamar again could definitely come to terms and agree with a deal with the Ravens. But like you said, I think it's very complicated right now.
Yeah, it's the next couple months are going to be telling, especially how draft kind of goes and who they ultimately end up drafting. I mean, drafting, if they maybe 1 through 3 don't pick an offensive weapon for him, it might be kind of a interesting conversation inside that office.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. Paul, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that he did demand a trade, and the timestamp for that is March 2nd. And the announcement of the non-exclusive tag was on the 8th. So I don't know if it all happened kind of the same situation, or if he demanded a trade and then that was something that because they can just put that on anybody at any time, and that still doesn't hurt it hurts the value of any trade that he could do. But if that's something that they put on afterwards, after he requested the trade, I do think that is a kind of a bad move by the Ravens. But you got to look at the fact that the amount of money he's asking for. There's only 7 teams in the league currently that can afford that contract, and several of those teams don't even need a quarterback. So the likelihood, and none of the big rumored teams are any of the teams that can afford him. So they're going to have to cut ties other ways, which will hurt the whole entire team more than bringing in a guy like Lamar. I think Lamar is a fantastic quarterback. I have nothing wrong with him. I think he's asking for a little too much money, but I think that precedent was set by Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray. So I understand where he's coming from. But the fact that the Raiders also, sorry to catch up, the fact that the Raiders also, when they drafted him, they designed a whole offense around him to put in a lot more RPO style, read option kind of run plays for the quarterback, because they didn't have that with Joe Flacco. So they basically created a whole new offensive scheme around the guy, and that's what they've been building their team ever since he's come into the league 5 years ago. So I think he is going to stay a Raven. I find it really hard. And also another team is going to have to trade 2 first-round picks and then pay him a max contract. I just see that very unlikely. But I have heard it rumored, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that during the actual draft or the week of the draft, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that have, some interest prior to the draft that are going to be really having the pressure on, especially during the actual draft itself. But like you said, Paul, I mean, I think that there are a lot of teams that are kind of just holding steady, including the Ravens. You mentioned the whole situation about the trade request followed with the non-exclusive franchise tag. I think what the deal is I think the Ravens said, hey, look, Lamar, because he doesn't have an agent. They said, look, you can go out there and go converse with every other team, all 31 teams. Because, dude, every team to get Lamar Jackson services, unless you're like the Kansas City Chiefs or, like the Cincinnati Bengals or any team with a solid franchise quarterback, I think that it makes sense to do your due diligence and at least talk to him. But I really think that it comes down to the Ravens saying, go converse with all 31 other teams and see if you can find that deal that you are so looking forward to signing. And if you can find that deal and we can't match it, because it for the non-exclusive tab to work, if the Ravens cannot match it, then they will no matter what, the trade goes through. So if the Ravens are in a little bit of a cap fluctuation for these, like, let's say next 1 to 2 years, and a team has a lot of available cap right away, they could make a deal work. I just think that the market for Lamar services right now it's just not where Lamar thinks and imagines it to be. I don't think that he's worth the 2 first-round picks because of, one, you're going to have to pay him a ton of money, and he really wants a fully guaranteed to massively guaranteed contract. And 2, I mean, a lot of teams are doing really well with their rookie quarterbacks. I mean, like we brought this up earlier, I think that 3 out of the 4 conference championship teams have quarterbacks on rookie deals. So I'm not saying that every team that can go draft a rookie quarterback is going to make it to the conference championship. In no means am I saying that. But I think that having some extra cap to roll around to different positions and sign other starters to have better weapons and a better defense behind it, like, I think that's really the new kind of look at some of these teams, like potentially the Ravens here, if they actually decide to move on from Lamar.
Yeah,
I do think Lamar is one of those top 5, top 6 kind of guys when he's healthy. That has been a struggle for him, and I'm sure that's part of why the guaranteed money is scary for the Ravens as well as any other team. But I would consider paying him. It's just the fact that not a lot of teams can do that, and also with the success rate of teams, making deep runs in the playoffs with young quarterbacks, because quarterbacks coming out are so good now. I mean, why would you waste? I mean, not say waste. Why would you pay a guy $40 million when you can pay him, $5 million a year for first couple overall picks, and then you get him for 5 years already?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going on that vein a little bit, guys. Maybe asking a little more than they're worth, or maybe valuing themselves very highly, I guess better said. Another guy that kind of comes up in that conversation is OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., kind of one of the more talked about free agents over the past year, coming off an ACL injury in the Rams-Bengals Super Bowl. What was it, last year? That's kind of one guy that seems to be, or rumored to be, asking quite a bit, and no one's really taking the jump on it. Kind of, Tim, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I think this whole wide receiver market during the offseason has been a little, I'd say lackluster. I mean, I think that the best wide receiver you really had coming out of this was Jacoby Myers going to the Raiders. So I'm going to be, I'm going to be blunt. I'm a little short on OBJ. I think that the knee injuries are a little concerning, considering it's already, his second, I believe it's his second ACL tear. I do know that they're, easy to recover from nowadays, but being it's his second one and he's already been on 3 teams, I don't know if I believe in his continuous sales pitch. So I'm pretty out on OBJ. I think he's worth it to a team that has a solid, young core of wide receivers for him to step in and be a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. But I'd put it this way: most wide receiver 2s aren't making, $12 to $15 million a year, and I think that that's from what I've heard, and that's a rumor going about it of what he's demanding.
Yeah, Paul, what are your thoughts on him?
Nothing has come out set in stone in terms of any offer sheets. People have been rumored that he was asking for 15 to $20 million. The only thing he's said publicly is that he just doesn't want, $3 to $4 million for a contract for a year, which I think that's fair. I think Odell should be worth more than that. When he is on the field, he is electric. He is a big name, so he's going to help ticket sales no matter what. It is interesting because he is on the wrong side of 30, coming off an ACL injury, and that, albeit a non-contact ACL injury. So you never know what he didn't look like he tweaked it super hard. It was kind of a weird injury when it did happen. But it'll be interesting to see. I want to see some practice footage, see how he's running his routes. But I think a team that's in a win now mode, that's definitely, like the Jets, if they do end up getting Aaron Rodgers, they need that. They just traded Elijah Moore, so they have an opening at wide receiver. I think Odell's doesn't necessarily need to be that wide receiver 1 there, but he can slot in, be productive, be a valued contributor, and then aid on a team that it has a promising young core, and then they get those couple key assets that'll kind of bring them over the top.
Yeah. I completely agree. Tim, do you have anything you want to add, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, look, he can definitely contribute. I think that he still, could be a wise veteran to some of these younger wide receivers. I think the Jets would be a fabulous fit. I do think that they, I know that they traded Elijah Moore, but I still think they still have a decent amount of wide receivers on their squad. But I think with Aaron Rodgers as the quarterback, you can never have enough weapons. But one team of what I would be curious to see, and, I know we just talked about them a little bit ago, but the Baltimore Ravens, man. I think that, if you are, the Ravens and you're happy keeping Lamar at that $32.4 million cap hit, if you could bring in Odell on like a 2-year, $22 million deal, $23 million deal, I think that would be pretty, I think it'd be a little eye opening for the league, especially the AFC North. I think that, the Bengals are obviously the team to beat, but I mean, if you can get Lamar a true, decent weapon in OBJ, and for OBJ to help, young guys like Rashad Bateman and, Devin Duvernay, I mean, you never know. But again, I think that, great player when he's healthy. I think he showed that and proven that during the Rams, playoff run 2 years ago. But I still, again, second, ACL injury, and to be requesting that $12 to $15 million range. If I'm an NFL franchise that isn't desperate at wide receiver, I'm gonna take a hard pass there.
Kind of continuing on receivers on the wrong side of 30, another really good guy, but once again, kind of older, kind of some question marks around his health. I guess he's had kind of some ankle injuries and a little bit of hamstring issues as well. DeAndre Hopkins, right now he's on a 2-year deal with $54 million left. Rumors have it that he's looking for kind of a new deal. Sounds like he's wanting to go kind of to a contender, but the Cardinals' asking price seems to be kind of blocking him out of kind of some potential trades. What are y'all thinking on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say that I'd hold on DeAndre Hopkins, like pending his, what do they call him, Nuke? Depending on Nuke Hopkins, requested new deal, and what the Cardinals' asking price is, I'd probably just kind of wait and see what happens. Look, if Arizona is willing, to lower their asking price to just the right amount, I think that there's some team that's looking to pull that trigger. So, like, I mean, again, even after he served his suspensions, Hopkins had a really great year this past year. So I think teams that are looking for a wide receiver 2 would definitely be looking into making that call. But again, with the rumors now coming out that the Cards might, debate on cutting D-Hop, I mean, I think they lost some leverage there, and
Well, I
being a
think
Cowboys fan, I
as a
could see a similar deal compared to
well,
last year's
as
Lamar
a
Cooper
Cardinals
trade.
fan, I think that's someone else just trying to throw a wrench into it to try and drop his value, to be honest. Like in our current situation, we're in full rebuild. That you can see with their offseason moves, they're playing it very conservatively. They're not making big signings. They're just filling roster holes, trying to field a full roster pretty much. It doesn't really help us if we cut him. I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely not.
we're spending money on him regardless, but we're not gaining anything. It's not like we're
Yeah, but
in
there's a
win
reason
now.
why you
Well,
didn't
we're not
trade
in
him
win now
already.
mode this year or even next year, I don't think, because this year's burned. I mean, you're playing, what is it, maybe weeks 1 through 8 if you're lucky with a second string quarterback or like kind of a filler guy until Kyler comes back. And you're just praying he comes back from, once again, ACL injury, kind of like OBJ a little bit. There's some question marks. So I think they're kind of chalking this year up. And at that point, you just have 1 year left of D Hop, which is like, do you need the free money?
I don't know. I think that to me, look, there's a reason why you didn't trade him already. I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
the offseason is well underway, and there's a reason why you haven't traded him, and that's because a he's an older receiver and he's wanting a new deal. He's wanting to get paid. I don't know how much that is, and I don't know if that's going to be a potential like Devonte Adams like deal because when he is playing, he is very productive. But on the flip side, I think teams aren't bidding; they're not buying. So
I have a hard time justifying that. Like, I love D Hop, but he has not had like his prime Texan days at all in Arizona. He hasn't come close to it. He's been kind of injury prone. Suspension didn't help. I mean, he's been good, but he definitely has not hit his peaks in Arizona.
When I think that one kind of the big, and I've heard some announcers say it, the big kind of key thing, he tore his MCL and then immediately gets a suspension for PED. So I'm thinking teams may be kind of hesitant on him that he thinks he's past his prime as well. So he's, I'm not going to, nothing's proven yet. So I don't know exactly what he took and what the substance were. They're banned no matter what. So he should have known that. His training staff should have known that. But the fact that he felt the need to take those, whether he knew about it, I would assume he does. Most players know exactly what they're putting in their body. Whether he did or did not, he still took them to essentially get back to what he thought would be his form. Obviously, that kind of bit him in the butt, and he did have to miss 6 games. But he killed it when he came back. I mean, Kyler was throwing 10 to almost 15 targets a game to him.
I mean, he was an immediate plus. He was an immediate add to the offense for
Yeah,
sure.
it was definitely a boot. I mean, the Cardinals' offense looked completely different, at least for a short period of time before Kyler got hurt. But the couple games that they played together, I mean, it was a noticeable difference, and you could definitely feel his presence. But the fact that he's lasted this long without a trade, first off, there's no reason for the Cardinals to trade him. Like Brandon said, they're not in a win now mode. They're kind of just rebuilding anyway, and Kyler's he's going to miss most of the season nursing that ACL. I don't think they're going to cut him because they're still going to. They're only saving $8 million, and like I said, they're not strapped for cash, and they're not trying to sign anybody. So I don't think that's any worthwhile. Now I do think if you see DeAndre Hopkins move, I think he is going to be a draft day kind of trade.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think I could see him being packaged with that number 3 overall pick to try and push the return a little bit for them. I mean, since it doesn't seem like they're going to get what they want out of him, what is it, like the second round pick, like late second round pick, and then a player of value type thing? Doesn't sound like they're going to get that, but if they can add him to that third to maybe get a better first or something like that out of a team, might be worthwhile. Then just go pure rebuild, pull some picks out of him and your number 3 overall pick, and start from scratch and get some youth in the building. Because, I mean, depth is still kind of a question mark for that team.
So, I mean, I agree with you. Like you said earlier, the Cardinals are a little bit in not necessarily a total complete rebuild, but I
Pretty
think that they
close.
are. I mean, I think they're in. I would say a reload or a recharge. They need players. They need depth. They need some new blood. So, hear me out on this. You currently have the third pick, right? If you're Arizona, Indianapolis. I mean, they need a quarterback. They've been interested in a quarterback. if I'm Arizona, I would potentially look at, hey, look, I have interest from the Titans, from the Falcons. I would even go all the way to like the Jets and Commanders and say, look, I have all this interest. Are you willing to make a move up, and I could ship you DeAndre Hopkins for your new your new quarterback, so he can have a consistent veteran option, because the Colts definitely need a wide receiver. And in return, we can push this trade forward with as the Cardinals, getting the draft capital that I really want, so I can kind of rebolster my roster. I think that's a potential landing spot. Another team that I wouldn't throw out there is the New York Giants. They definitely need some wide receiver help. Maybe even like the Titans or Panthers. But one sneaky team that I would not be surprised if they came out like on draft day for like a day 2 or day 3 pick for DeAndre Hopkins is the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, they could be going win now mode, honestly. They're getting pretty close.
I mean, they were borderline on the cusp of making the playoffs. They have two first round picks this year in the top 20, if I'm not mistaken. And if you really think about it, I mean, they have Jamison Williams, great player, burner, deep threat. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a phenomenal slot wide receiver. If you can have Hopkins as a possession,
defense also.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to being a very complete team.
Absolutely, man. So I wouldn't be surprised, if I'm Detroit, really thinking about it and doing my due diligence on that.
Yeah. And with that being said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, drop us a like, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. Thank y'all so much.